Hello everyone, I'm Nicole Beaker, HR Manager at Senior Home Companions, and I am so excited to bring you today's caregiver training topic entitled Effective Communication. I have had just the best time putting together this panel, working with the ladies, coming up with the questions and scenarios that are coming directly from you. So I want to say thank you for that as well. Today, we're going to focus on 4 key areas of effective communication for caregivers. The first one being caregiver to caregiver communication. So the ladies are going to kind of dig into that and share different stories with you on how to effectively communicate with one another. Our next topic is going to be caregiver to client. Then we're going to go into caregiver to client's family, and then lastly, caregiver to the office staff. What we're hoping you're going to get out of today's session is just some different perspective from these ladies who have graciously agreed to be on our panel, share their backgrounds, their words of wisdom, their tidbits with you, because they do all come from different experience levels with this topic. And what we're hoping is this is going to launch a series of mini conversations between us and you as our caregivers so that we can all work together to continue to provide that epic service to our clients that Senior Home Companions has become known for. So I want to say thank you to Sabrina, our moderator, and then to Alicia and Liz and Ashley for agreeing to be on the panel. And again, you might recognize Alicia. I want to call her out especially because she is in fact Alicia Reese, our Senior Home Companions 2020 Caregiver Ambassador of the Year. So something for all of you caregivers to think about as you're out there working and doing your jobs day in and day out and providing that personalized service and consistent care that, again, if you're nominated to be that Caregiver Ambassador of the Month, you too might get a call from me to participate in events like this. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very, very busy schedules to watch today's session. And we look forward to having more of these in the future with you. So with that, I'm going to pass to our moderator, Sabrina. She is a licensed clinical social worker, field director, and assistant professor of social work at Marian University, who has agreed to work with us today and moderate this panel. So with that, I'm going to pass to Sabrina, and I'll be back here after today's session. Thank you.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Sabrina. I will be the moderator for the panel this afternoon. And on our panel, we'll be addressing questions that have been submitted by caregivers that are important points of interest that you would like some experts to be able to give you some direction on. So before I get started, I'm here with Alicia and Liz and Ashley, and I'm going to give each one of you a chance to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Alicia Reese. I am a caregiver and I am with Senior Home Companions.
Hi, my name is Liz Erickson. I am with Halo Senior Solutions, and I am also a caregiver with Senior Home Companions. I've been with Senior Home Companions for a year and also with Halo for a little bit over a year.
I'm Ashley Armstrong. I'm a registered nurse liaison for Heartland Home Health and Hospice in their hospice division.
Wonderful, thank you. So I kind of want to start off just by asking you guys a general question. What does effective communication mean to you, and why do you think it's very important when it comes to the healthcare industry and specifically with elder care?
I think it kind of sets the stage a lot for, the visits are going to be following. It kind of sets that stage for how those initial encounters are going to be. You want to make a good first impression with your patients and also with their family members. Makes your life better, it makes their life better, and it's just a part that oftentimes gets overlooked. I think we focus a lot on the clinical aspects and we forget just those basic communication skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree, and I think that it's very important to build that relationship with the client before we start doing things with the client. So building that relationship to me is important in that you are listening to them, you're hearing what they're saying to you, paying attention to the details of their story, or just trying to get to know them a little bit better. So the communication a part of it also of your speech slowing down or to me, all of that is super important in the friendship building of your client relationship.
Right, absolutely. And I know in the field of social work, having done therapy, there's a lot of research that talks about the most important factor when it comes to whether or not an intervention is successful is the relationship between the therapist and the client.
Right.
So building that rapport and having that good relationship can be the factor that determines whether or not that's a successful intervention with them. So.
Yes, and you can have that verbal communication to make it effective, but you also have to have that communication in writing as well. So, we can always communicate verbally, and that's a key part of it, but that old saying that if you don't put it in writing, it never happened. So that's that part that we have to make sure that's included in the effective communication aspect of it.
Absolutely.
I would also say that body language plays such a huge part in that as well. I know encountering a client, I will often take a step back unless the client comes to me, then I will lean more into the client. But the body language of a person and how I respond to that makes a huge difference in the relationship.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we have several different categories of questions. And the primary categories are questions regarding communication from caregiver to caregiver, also from caregiver to client, caregiver to client's family, and then caregiver to office staff. So we're going to kind of just bounce around a little bit and kind of touch on as many of these as we can in the time that we have. And Alicia, I know that you mentioned that communication written as well as verbal. And I feel like a lot of that falls under that caregiver to caregiver category. So what do you suggest if there are caregivers that don't communicate well with other caregivers? What kinds of tools would you recommend to kind of facilitate better communication from caregiver to caregiver?
That's where the communication logs come in at. We kind of instituted that at one of the clients that I currently work with now, and it's been a blessing in disguise. Where we kind of catered the log, should I say, to that client. Anything that could have happened from the time the client woke up to the time the client went to bed is on that paperwork. So if you come in and never worked with that client before, you will be able to know what's going on and during that transition period, and you had to run out the door and didn't have time to say one word to the next person. You will be able to go in and work with that client and feel comfortable. And that's the purpose of that communication log or that paperwork. And that was what we were trying to accomplish when we created that paperwork. And so doing the training of new staff, that's the feedback that we've received, that they are like, wow, this is great, this is good. Oh, you've created this, or I've never seen this before, so that was the goal that we were trying to accomplish with that. And so that made me feel really good, and I would like to see that go across to a lot of the other different places in some of the other places that Senior Home Companions has, or even other clients' homes, because ultimately I don't think necessarily it's that people are not trying to communicate. Sometimes time doesn't allow, emergencies happen, people are in a rush and they just can't communicate, or they just forget sometimes, and you just can't tell every little detail that happened on your shift. So sometimes I've even instituted that put it where you're at most of your shift. So the place that I'm talking about is we're always in the kitchen. So we put it in the location on the counter of the kitchen because that's where most of all the action takes place. So if you have the sheet right there where you're at all the time, you just turn around, document. And so you're more likely to put everything that happened and not miss things. So that would more than likely increase effective communication and not necessarily mean that you're not communicating with the other caregiver or that there's an issue, but it would cover all aspects of effective communication. And
We have something similar to that with Heartland.
yeah.
I'm the admissions nurse, so when I go out, I'm pretty much going out blind, going off of the patient's report, the family's report. There's always family members there. So what we have is something for when the case managers go out to see their patient, they have what's called a visit alert. It will show anything, if they're a DNR, if there's something to say. There's some families say, please don't tell them you're admitting them for hospice. So we'll have that on there so we know what terms to use. And it sometimes won't let you start your visit until you have acknowledged that you have seen those alerts. So that kind of helps because we have social work, we've got the chaplains, we've got multiple different disciplines within, for that same patient. So we do those notes, the coordination notes. It always prompts you, did you enter a coordination note for this in your narrative? So that seems to be really helpful because then that next person can go in and see, those important reminders and exactly what happened at the last visit.
So it's electronic?
Yes, everything's electronic.
Yeah, and see, I like that because, and you're saying it won't let you go to the next thing until you acknowledge it.
Yes.
I like that, yeah.
Yep.
And I think the prompting and not moving on until you acknowledge is really, really helpful. And so that's what we were trying to accomplish, not having to write so much, and then we put everything that's even remotely possible to that goes along with that particular client. Check boxes where we're checking off, and then you're writing as little as possible. Lately we've had to write a lot, but we want to try to make it to the point where the caregiver is not what's the word I'm looking for? Not wanting to fill out the sheets, because that's a lot of the feedback that we're getting is that they're like not wanting to write so much. So the goal that I made it tweak the sheets like 3 or 4 times, trying to get it to where the caregivers that are coming on are not I don't know the word.
Burdened.
Burdened with saying that this is too much to do, this is too much to do. So we're trying to go with check boxes and things that are just like quickly that they can, skim across. So, everything is all about documentation, but we want to make it as easy as possible, but still beneficial to the client.
Yeah, absolutely. So, communicating caregiver to caregiver is important. What about ways to engage clients? And I know, Ashley, you said you kind of end up going out cold, you don't have a lot of info to start with. Can you think of really good strategies to help engage clients, especially at that first meeting?
Just being as friendly as possible. You got to realize you're coming into their home, whether it be in an assisted living, at their actual home. So you're a guest in their house, you want to come in, you want to make them feel comfortable because they are about to disclose, all the problems they're having that may be difficult to talk about. So just making them feel comfortable, I think, will just help the flow of everything.
Yeah, I would agree. I think being calm is also a great asset to have when entering someone's home, with a smile on your face, dressed appropriately, of course, but sometimes just saying, hi, how was your day? And then trying to engage with them as well is really important for me when I just go in cold. Thankfully, with Senior Home Companions, we have some notes to look at that we can learn a little bit about the client before we actually go into the home. So that has been helpful because then I can connect with the person and say, ask something in particular about maybe their family or something that they may be interested in, and that can generate a conversation from there.
Yes, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go in for the first time to meet with a client, and I've not seen, I know you all work with different systems, but how do you address clients initially? I know with social work, we're kind of always taught to introduce ourselves and the way we want to be addressed. So I typically would walk in, whether it's clients or my students that I teach, and say, you can call me Sabrina. And then I just say, how would you like me to address you? Whether they want to be called Mr. Smith or, you know, by their first name or a nickname, a family name, whatever. How do you guys usually approach that, learning how to address the client? Because I know some people find that awkward.
It can vary.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, most times I mean, personally, I always say Miss or Miss, Mrs. or Mr. and their first name. That's my take on all of my clients, unless they tell me otherwise. How do you normally do it?
I do it the same. I definitely do it the same. I think it's a generational thing too. I think people from previous generations have always addressed people Mr. Mr. Smith or whatever their name is, and then I too wait for them to correct me. If they don't correct me in how to approach their name in a different way, then I keep it at that. And I think it's another way we can respect our client.
And with me, whether I focus on the family first or the patient first, oftentimes with hospice, it depends on how that patient is. We have some patients who are nonverbal, so then, I do address the patient because we don't really know what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they can hear. So I always try to still talk to them as I'm doing their care. But if they are, not alert and oriented as some of the others are, then communication oftentimes happens more with their families.
Right.
So.
And speaking of families, do you recommend that the caregiver get explicit permission from the client before communicating with family members?
If they're able to, that's another thing. If that person, if they can't write but they can speak, you still want to make sure to be asking them everything. And they may need, I've had one who his father had to do all the signing, but still address that patient and try to give them as much dignity and autonomy as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still, personally, unless I have some sort of paperwork that states that the family member has power of attorney or guardianship, I always give my client the full respect of they have full reign to tell me what they want, how they want it, and I don't disclose any information to the other family member unless I'm given permission. I mean, that's just respect. I mean, that's just how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I do the same. Unless there's a power of attorney that we need to contact and we're told about, then it would be strictly with the client. However, I've had a client call a client who's cognitively, declining, and they'll call family members, and the family members will be on FaceTime or something, and the family member will say, well, how are you doing today? Or how is she doing today? And then I will speak to that because the client has actually called them or answered the call from the family member.
Well, you're present, so that's kind of their acknowledgement that it's okay to have that communication.
Yes.
We try to ask at the first visit and definitely put in those notes who we're allowed to talk to, whether it be the cousin, the aunt, the uncle. You never know how many people are going to want to call and check on that patient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Are there any specific topics that you feel like should be avoided when talking to family members?
I think it's about timing. When we go in, the first thing I'm not going to ask them is, are you a DNR or do you want CPR? That conversation has to happen, but trying to just be sensitive to probably the fact that they're extremely overwhelmed, they could be scared, just keeping that all in mind.
And I think too, with clients that have dementia, they may not be quite aware that they have dementia. And so I go in and I say, I'm here for a visit today. Can we have some coffee together? Or I'm here to have girls' day girls stay
Yes.
with you. I'm not here to babysit you or
Yeah.
to take care of you. It's more to spend time with that client so that I can get them to engage better and keep it sensitive to the communication with the family and the client.
Right, so kind of returning back to, I know I've heard both of you say, you know, that dignity and respect of the
Yes.
client, making sure you're maintaining that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned in clients that have dementia, and sometimes they don't realize that they have dementia. What's the best way to address a client or to calm a client who's agitated, who has dementia, or who may be combative or aggressive, either verbally or physically? Do you guys have some ideas of the best way to handle that?
Well, what I've done in the past is I have just kind of gone with the flow of whatever the situation I'm in. I kind of, okay, so if I feel like they're coming at me to necessarily hit me, I'll act like, oh, are you okay? I almost fell. Or I'll act like I'm tripping, or did you mean to do that? Or I'm okay. Oh man, I kind of like play a mind game that it's okay that I'm okay, but did you mean to do that? I don't necessarily call them out on it, but I act like I don't realize what happened. That's how I address it most times, because most times they don't realize what they're doing. And if you address it to the point where they are thinking that they are trying to do something to you and they don't realize that they are, but you address it that way to them, that's when they become real defensive. And then you can end up being in a situation that becomes harmful, because I've seen it switch around in a transfer with another individual when I was coming on a shift change, and I seen it switch right before my eyes. And so I've learned to handle it in that way. Even if you know that they really were trying to hit you, don't do it. Don't address it in that manner. I have literally been in that situation many a times when I've been punched in the chest, and I've acted as if they didn't mean to do it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I've just played dumb, like literally acted as if I didn't know that they were trying to do that, because it protected the situation from escalating. So that's how I always handle my situation, just because it protects the situation, and especially if you're by yourself.
Yes.
Because it becomes you against them, your word against them, and depending on the form of dementia and how bad it is, it can really go bad. And I've seen it happen on multiple occasions working in facilities, to the point that that's just how I choose to. Now, many people don't handle it like that, but that's just my take, and that's just how I choose to do it. How do you guys handle it, or how would you handle it?
I know, like, learning their triggers sometimes helps. Sometimes patients have certain things that are going to set them off, so those are things to avoid. And a lot of times, when people are angry, when they're acting out, they're not angry at you. They could have a basic need that's not being met. They could simply want water, and they can't tell you they want the water. So just kind of, if you go back to just, quick little assessment of the patient, check everything and just listen to them. And yes, don't be confrontational, like she said, because that's just going to make it a not happy situation.
Yeah, I think when we get really defensive with the client, that's when things start to really escalate.
Yep.
And a lot of people will take things personally when dealing with the client, and we can't.
Yeah.
Because it often has absolutely nothing to do with us. And like you were saying, it's something else, or we just have to pretend it's something else. A lot of it, again, is body language, and just kind of, as they're coming at you, either turn away or kind of just back up from them. But, obviously, you want to protect yourself as well, but anything that we can do to try to, avoid it, I think is really important. And then we had a situation where the client I was working with could not find her purse, and she was very, very mad that she couldn't find her purse, and was going around just checking into everything. And I looked for a little while with her to help her just, okay, I will look with you, I will honor that, I will respect that again. But then once we got to the bathroom, I said, oh, look, here's some nail polish. How do your nails look today? And we just started focusing in on how her nails looked today. And she got so distracted.
Yes.
Like, distraction is key.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just started working on her fingernails from there, and she forgot all about her purse.
Mm-hmm.
So that was incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of different ways, but you're also, what I heard all of you saying was having that empathy for the client, trying to figure out where they're coming from. Do they realize they're doing what they're doing? Maybe they have a need that's not being met. Maybe they're frustrated over something that has nothing to do with you, right? And so not taking any of that personally, which I think is really important. Kind of the same thing we do in social work, understanding that they're not mad at us, they're mad about a lot of things.
Right.
And a lot of times, if you just act like you're hurt and switch it around, oh my gosh, they take to that so well.
So is there a way, a good way, I know you talked about the log that you use to communicate with other caregivers. Is there a good way to kind of communicate to other caregivers, that maybe that assessment of what the client might need or what kind of mood they're in or how they're doing that day that can kind of help, I don't want to say warn them, but just kind of make them aware of what state the client is in?
Outside of the log and the quote-unquote direct communication during the transfer, I don't know any other way. Would you have some suggestions?
My only suggestion was if a group chat was created, maybe people could put that information into a group chat. A
Oh.
lot of times we don't have time, we're in a rush, or we just can't say things in front of a client, right?
Yeah.
So
Because
a group
it's not-
chat sounds like a great idea. I think for me personally, sometimes when it's just myself and my colleagues communicating, occasionally I will have a colleague that says something about a client that bothers me. Maybe the way they talked about the client, or if they said something that I felt was disrespectful, or if I see them interacting with that person later and I don't really like the way they're interacting with them. Have any of you ever experienced that? And if so, how do you think you would address that?
I think if there's, major concerns that you have and you see, it really is your obligation to not necessarily investigate it, but maybe go to their supervisor. Sometimes I think it would go over better if their superior was having that conversation with them rather than me saying, hey, I don't like what you said to this patient and I don't like how you talk to their family. That might just seem a little confrontational and just follow the chain of command. Chain of command.
I agree. And I think calling your encourager is a great place to go to, because I can share something there with that person who can pray with me in that situation about what's been going on and how it's affecting me as well.
Right. Okay. And kind of along the same line, how do you handle a situation if maybe the other caregiver says that they've completed certain tasks, but you can tell they haven't?
Chain of command.
Chain of command.
That's what managers and
Right.
supervisors and bosses, the ones who are
Right.
doing that quality checks. Obviously if you see something and someone forgot to enter a medication order, that's something you could easily shoot a message to the coworker and say, can you finish this? But if it's something that's more of a routine issue that's becoming a recurrent problem, then I think probably a more structured conversation needs to happen from their supervisor.
Definitely. Yeah, I would so agree with that.
Yeah, but I would actually maybe try to lead into a more conversational piece of that with the person, if depending on the task.
Yeah.
Because like if they said they did it and you could see that it wasn't done, maybe so maybe the dishes, and say you could say, well, what time did they have dinner? Because maybe they did do the dishes and they had a late dinner, and then there was another set of dishes that were done, and so they just didn't do dishes again.
Yeah.
Or say and again, it just depends on, because my role is completely different from, let's say, what your role is.
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying? It's different when you say tasks are not done. So, or maybe they did a 12-hour shift and they had a lot of company at the house, and they did do, let's say, the laundry and all of that stuff, and then there was a whole lot of visitors and she had to be changed all over again or something like that. And so there's a whole nother set again. And so they probably didn't do it again. So, there's a whole different things. And so when that next person came on, they may look like they didn't do things, but they actually did. They just didn't do it a second time or maybe a third time. So, sometimes when you're working those longer shifts, it could potentially be where you're having to do things a second or a third time, depending on if there's a whole lot of activity, quote unquote, at that person's home.
Right.
So sometimes a little bit of more probing and asking questions.
Not being so quick to judge. For some situations.
Yeah, I love that, because it's a matter of perspective too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, you didn't do what we needed done. But the other side of that perspective is I was really overwhelmed
Yeah.
on my
Ask
end
them
trying to care
why.
for you.
Yeah.
Why? But if it's a chronic problem, then I think we go towards your thing. But otherwise, I think we could go as far as too, if you know that a coworker is struggling and having a hard time, just to give them grace, and then maybe even do something nice for them so they don't have to do it in the next shift is even a beautiful thing. But like if it's a chronic thing, then that's a problem. But
because I've worked in both situations for, I'm very open-minded, because I've worked in both situations where, I'm very high-strung, I guess you would say, where I can handle it. But there are a lot of other caregivers where they just can't handle it. And so if I come on behind them and I see it, I'm quote unquote okay, but the next caregiver that comes on they're like, oh no, da 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 da, and I'm listening to it, I'm hearing it, I'm seeing it, I know what happened, I'm giving them grace, but I'm having to listen to the other person because I'm the team lead and I know what happened, but they're like, and I'm like, okay, I'll just get there and I'll do it, because I understand what happened, because I know that client's family has a lot going on. So that's why I could immediately know that this is what happened. So that's why I was able to say exactly this situation.
Right. So we've talked about empathy for clients and how important it is, but now you guys are talking about empathy for coworkers,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Empathy for your colleagues, and saying, I understand what you have been through. Today has been rough. How can I help? Right.
Right.
And it sounds like the encouragers are great
Yes.
people to go to in that situation too, and say, oh, my coworker had a rough day. Can you pray with this person? It's been tough. So I think that's really important as well. Empathy for our clients and our colleagues as well. So.
Especially when it comes to the different disciplines talking together. I know there's a lot of nurses who eat their young, and the way nurses and aides interact, you always want to be respectful of each other, because you may think you know what they're doing, but their job sometimes is 100 times harder than what you're doing, and you just don't realize it. So
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to working with families, we've established the importance of empathy with clients, with colleagues, and also with families. So in the situation, for example, where a family wants you to do something very specific for the client, but the client doesn't want that, how can you express empathy both for the family and the client at the same time? How do you resolve that kind of a situation?
By trying.
By trying.
Yes.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
You try. You try to do exactly what the family wants. If the family wants it, you try. The client can stop you. The client can express that they do not desire it, they do not want it. But as long as you have attempted to do what the family has asked you to do, that's all you can do. And to me, you're meeting both halfway. And you've done your job. I mean, to me, that's all you can do as a caregiver, because ultimately you're here for the client. And if the client does not so desire it, you can't do it, because this is who we're here for. We're here for the client. The family always thinks they know best.
Right.
Always, 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 always. But at the end of the day, unless the client is not competent, we are here for the client. And if they verbally tell us that they do not want it, that is who we are going to listen to.
Right, so you've kind of covered both bases.
Yes.
You go to the family and say, I attempted to do what you asked me to do.
Yes.
The client said they did not want me to do that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Find out their intentions for, why are they asking you to do this? If it's something that absolutely needs to be done, then you're gonna have to work with the family to figure out how to get that need met. But if it's something that's just minor, that is just gonna upset the client, then yes, you said you're there for that client or patient, and yes.
Yeah, I think it too, like the intent is very important, because if it's for somebody's safety, well then we do need to make that happen. But if it's not necessarily for their safety, then
Pick your battles.
pick your battles. And there are different ways I've tried to get a client to do things that the family has wanted, either physically, little cues laid out, or verbally, but that, like you were saying, it doesn't always happen, so we just do the best we can.
So in the event that you as caregivers would have some concerns, and maybe the family doesn't have the concerns, how would you address that with the family? If you don't feel like the family is really taking you seriously, for example, a safety concern, or some aspect of caregiving that you think is a concern and the family does not, which would be kind of the opposite situation.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, basically, we are actually in that situation. So you just document. You document after you have verbally told them. You document. You also let the office know. The office is to know about this, and they will actually talk to the family as well. But the main thing is that you are documenting and you are constantly telling the family about this. But as long as you're documenting that you have informed the family, that is the biggest thing, because if something was to happen and you have not showed that you have informed the family of this, then that could fall back on you, and as well as the office. And that is where things can get really tricky and can be a liability. So in my perspective, making sure that client is safe is 100% my biggest concern, and I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that client is safe, even if that means not performing whatever task they're asking me to do. If the safety is, if the client is in harm's way, because if you're going to ask me to give something that I can see, let's say, is making that client throw up, and if that client is throwing up and can't take that medicine, and they can potentially become dehydrated, but you say it's pertinent for this client to take this medicine, and on my watch, this client can have a health issue, I'm not going to give that medicine if they're continuously having everything come out of them. I'm not going to do that, because I've documented it, I've told them, and that's protocol to me.
Yes.
I feel like, what would you do?
Sometimes I feel like, if the families may ask you to do something and you may think, why are they asking me this? It could just be a misunderstanding. They may not understand, well, the doctor has ordered this for this patient because of this reason. When I'm admitting them, if I think they need oxygen and the family's like, oh no, they're fine. If I think they need that oxygen, I will get that order from the doctor and I will say, the doctor agrees this needs to happen. So using your resources, making sure the family understands your reasoning, not just saying, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, or I do need to do this in order to keep them comfortable. So, education.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a matter of saying it in different ways too.
Right. Let me explain this a different way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we've covered a lot of information about caregiver to caregiver, caregiver to clients, caregiver to families. And just before we wrap up, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about caregiver to office staff. So in the event that you feel like you're not connecting with a family, you're not building that rapport and establishing that relationship, how do you communicate that to the office staff?
One, I think you can call the encourager in that one, because one of their questions is, what do you struggle most with? Or what can I pray for you? Or, what's going good, what's going bad? So that's something that I would definitely speak to them about. I think with the family too, if we've tried a variety of ways to speak with them, it's not just like, I've tried. We have to try a variety of ways to communicate with them in order to make that successful. And if it's still not working, then yes, I would bring it to the office. I would start with the encourager and then also with the supervisor, and just let the supervisor know. Because we want it to be a good relationship for the client and the worker in order to have it be a good experience for everyone. It may not just be a good fit for you.
Right. And if you're having difficulty communicating with that office staff, say you left a message, they haven't contacted you back, what steps do you feel like you need to take to further that concern?
If you don't have someone that you can rely on and confide in, usually the company will give you some 1-800 number that is for any kind of concerns, and I do know employees who have used that a lot, sometimes for the wrong reasons, but
that does happen.
I think the workers that are out in the field, the office staff should want them to all be comfortable where they are, because if they're doing their job out in the field, then that's so many less phone calls the office staff is going to get, because there's, people who have to handle all of those concerns coming in, so, yeah.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts?
I think with persistence too. Just one phone call probably, if they get busy. I always look at the other side of the coin as well. So if the office isn't answering my phone call, maybe the call got lost, maybe they're busy, so I will try again. If a call doesn't work, then I try a text. If a text doesn't work, then I try an email. I wouldn't encourage you to let that go on for very long, but somebody should probably get back with you within 48 hours, I would guess. So
I think that's a good expectation, because I know there's days when I don't mean to ignore someone or not respond, the day just gets busy, so I like that. 24 to 48 hours to respond is good.
Yeah.
And we've circled back around to empathy again, this time for our office staff, right?
Yes.
Right.
So I think what a lot of people in helping professions struggle with, and I know being a social worker, this is something I struggle with, and a lot of my colleagues, is that aspect of empathy for yourself, right? Caring for yourself. What do you do when you are burned out, you are depressed, you aren't finding the joy in what you used to find joyful, and you're overwhelmed? What do you do?
I take time out for myself.
Tell me what that looks like for you.
I shop and I get in the dark and I sleep and I stay away from people and just
So you recharge your batteries.
Yes, I take time to myself. I don't talk to nobody. I literally go away. Really, I'm not exaggerating. So that's what I do.
That's how you recharge.
And it helps. So because I pour into people day in and day out, and I give all of me over and over and over again, and so I just need that time away from everybody.
Right. Self-care looks different for everyone. Liz, what about you?
Right. I self-care is so important, and I just feel that for me, I like to call people who tell me great things about me. And then I feel better. Oh, Liz, you're such a helpful person. Oh, whatever they'll tell me. But I call friends that will pour life into me, that will pray with me. I too like to sleep, so I will take extra time to sleep. Working out is really important for me, so I try to do that every day, and that's just a self-care thing. And my spirituality is important, so I feel like I can't really pour out to others unless I have my spirituality, somebody filling me. So that's how I operate as well. And I just feel like, you know, if I'm eating healthy, trying to exercise, all those things adding up will help me to be a better caretaker. But sleep is really a big one.
Sleep is important. Ashley, what does self-care look like for you?
Well, after being at work all day, you know, I go home to 2 kids, so that's, I
Feel
can't
that.
really escape and just get away from everybody. So, yeah.
I got 2 kids, I do.
Mine don't.
I
Mine
do.
won't follow that. So if I've had a really bad day, or if I know I'm doing something super stressful, I'll say, okay, when this is done, I'm gonna get myself pizza tonight. I'm gonna get myself sushi. I will, you know, do something that I don't normally do. When I have to drive from Terre Haute to Indianapolis, I always allow myself a Starbucks on those days. So then when I'm waking up, I'm like so excited to get my coffee. And then, you know, just decompressing in the evenings. I've got certain shows that I like to watch throughout the week. Netflix is my baby. I love it. So that's kind of my way to decompress is just, yes, turn the lights down, eat my food, and watch my Netflix.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people forget when it comes to self-care, it can be something as simple as drawing good boundaries, right? And
Right.
when people try and suck you into more and more, right? If you're known for being a super helpful person,
Right.
do you want to volunteer for this? Would you like to help out with that? And I think, you know, and with kids too, being able to draw a boundary and say, you know what? Mommy's gonna put herself in timeout for the evening, right?
That doesn't
You're
work.
gonna find something else to do. But to be able to do that, to draw boundaries with all kinds of people in your life,
So
and I think
important.
one of the most important things that I've recently learned is that no is a complete sentence. Not no but, or I'd love to accept, just no.
Yeah.
Right? And that's self-care too.
Totally.
You know, that's
You're right.
just as
Totally.
important to be able to tell people, no, I'm at my limit, you know, if you're a caregiver for a living, that
The burnout.
pouring a lot, you don't want to run into a situation of burnout.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I
Absolutely.
turn off everything. I'm serious. I am not exaggerating.
Kids, sorry, always
I
going.
turn off.
My kids don't have an off button, so
Totally
I forgot.
unplugged.
I'm totally unplugged.
So we have covered a lot of different things today, and I would like to ask you guys, what's your best piece of advice for new caregivers or someone new in your field? What is your best piece of advice to give that person?
I've learned a lot from, you know, people who have maybe been at the company longer. Just walking in, being extremely humble, knowing that, you know, you may think you know everything, but there's certain ways of doing things within the company, and yeah, just
I would say just be open-minded.
yes. Yep.
Come in ready to learn,
Yes.
humbly, be open-minded.
Use your resources wisely.
And I would say stay calm.
Yes.
And also be gentle with yourself as well.
Yes, don't be too hard on yourself.
Right.
I like that.
I think the advice I always gave out was give it at least 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all gonna seem very new, very overwhelming.
Right.
There's so much to learn, so much to think about. Give it 6 months.
Yep.
And then see how you feel, because usually that's about the time that
Yeah.
things start to click and you get into a groove, so.
When that happens, I always try to think back to, okay, I felt this way before.
Mhm.
I came out of it. I was fine. So I just know, okay, this may feel uncomfortable for a while, but it's going to be fine in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what would you hope that the caregivers who are joining us today would take from this discussion? What do you hope is the number one thing that they take from this today?
This will allow them to learn how to deal and cope with things that they are currently dealing with now. Better even adapt to the situations. And for me personally, things like this help me to cope, because I can tell you, when you're out in the field, most times it's yourself and the client, and you feel like you're alone. And so this will help other caregivers know that they're not alone. We all are dealing and coping with different situations, and this panel has helped us we have helped everybody know that there's a whole lot of things that happen, feelings, examples of things that are going on, and as you can tell, there's versatility, and we have shared a lot here.
Yeah, we have a lot in common.
We have a lot in common. And so, I mean, hopefully they can feel like we're closer, and that they're not by themselves. That's what we are hoping they get out of this.
Yeah.
Being open-minded and maybe trying to do something a different way than what you did before. It may turn out to, be better than what you had originally been doing. So just, being open-minded.
Yeah, because when you're in different places and you're working separate, you have a tendency to feel like you're all by yourself. And you're not.
Yeah.
And I would just say that there are so many ways to communicate, to keep trying different ways to communicate, and also know that you matter. Like, without caregivers, what is Senior Home Companions? We need you, and they are so much of what this company is made of.
Yes.
If you're not there, then who's there? Like, what you do matters. What you do totally matters. You're impacting lives every single day with how you're treating a client and their family, so many other people, even the office.
Everyone. Right?
Everyone, yes.
Empathy all around.
Yes.
I think that's a good takeaway. So, absolutely. Well, thank you, Ashley, Liz, Alicia, for your participation today. I've really enjoyed talking with all of you and getting to know more about what you do and being able to share a little bit about what I do. So, thank all of you for tuning in. And if we didn't address the question that you had, please know that Nicole is going to share some information about additional Q&A sessions that you can join later on, where we can dive a little deeper into some of these subject areas if you're interested. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.
Wow, how was that? I'm still reeling from all the fantastic information that the ladies shared with us. So I hope you are too. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed today's session as much as I did. I think we could have gone on for even longer talking about that topic of effective communication. So with that, we know we didn't get to everybody's questions. We got to a lot of them, but what we're going to do is we are going to follow this session up with a live Q&A session on Tuesday, May 25th from 1 to 2 p.m. So make sure to watch your emails. I'm going to be sending out more information about that along with some information about today's session. So you can register to attend that live Q&A via email. If you don't get that email, make sure to call the office, ask for me, Nicole Beaker, HR Manager, and I will be happy to get that link to you so that you too can participate in the live Q&A about effective communication. And you can even personally thank each of the ladies today for joining into today's conversation and sharing their words of wisdom with you. So with that, I say thank you. Go out there and continue to have an epic day. Bye-bye.